podcast. We want to just talk about you, your invention. You won a prize. Let's talk a little bit about it, right? Like, hey, can you like introduce what prize you won and what was the product?
Sure. So, in the past 3-4 months, there have been many such. So, which one would you like to talk about? Maybe specifically the Nats hackathon. Maybe we can start with that because that was the interest. But all the other ones are also quite relevant in the context of proper use of agentic AI and industry use of agentic AI. So yeah, so basically, the National Security Hackathon is like once a year event. It's held by Shield Capital and Cerebral Valley in the Ferry Building in SF, and the sponsors are usually like the NATO tech guys, CIA tech guys, a few other like really important defense contractors and things like that. So initially I went there just for the vibes, I guess. I didn't really know what would happen, because when you go to these places, it's mostly hard tech, right? Like a lot of them have like sensors and like all of that stuff. And I don't think I ever worked on like hard tech since college. So it had been a while, but I did work on some sort of like training edge machine learning models, local machine learning models, things like that. So there was that angle to it. So when I saw this, I called up a friend who was into like hardware, and I said, you know what, let's go and see what we can do. It's interesting. So we went there. A lot of interesting guys, a lot of very very competitive, interesting people there to meet, right, and network with. So eventually, what we did was we started off with something else, then we pivoted, repivoted, and then we ended up with what we had right now, which is basically a airdroppable wildfire system. So what we noticed was that wildfires in California, like I've been here since like 10 years now, and every year or every alternate year there's a wildfire, right? No matter how much investment is put into the tech. So I was trying to understand why this was happening. So specifically the fires which happened last year in LA, right? Or like not even last year, like early this year, right? In LA, uh, they had the point of inception of the fire to the actual like till it became like a complete devastating fire was like 45 to 50 minutes. And currently all the systems that we have, all the tech that we have, right, even like satellites that we have, right, which are used to look at it, only scan for every 2 hours. So even with like the most cutting edge tech that we have, you get a window of 2 hours, and within those 2 hours, in the first 50 minutes, you'll probably burn down like a large part of the community. So the idea was that how can we make this compelling? So this is where I guess the Indian jugaad kind of mentality came in place, where I was like, why can't we make this so cheap that it can actually be just spread across everywhere, right? And then it kind of becomes a no-brainer to actually use something like this. So what we did was we got like a Raspberry Pi Zero, and then we got a bunch of sensors from like the sponsors that they had. So we had like a temperature sensor, we had a particulate matter sensor, we had a small IR camera. So we said, okay, and then we got a LoRa antenna, which is like a long range antenna, which is used to communicate with long distances, roughly like 10 kilometers or so, like 5 miles or so. Without internet, right? So that's the general idea. So we said, okay, we got this Raspberry Pi Zero. Let's attach all of these sensors and train machine learning models for these. So for the temperature sensor and the particulate matter sensor, we trained like edge LSTM models. The data which we got was like very silly because we were there like overnight, right? So we had like a hair dryer, and then we used that to get like like ambient readings, and then increased readings for the temperature thing. For the particulate matter, we had like the agarbattis, right? Like we we just use those like a bunch of times to see like the smoke in the air, right? And kind of get the particulate matter, like the deviations from the ambient readings. And once we got those two classification algorithms down, we tried to test them one by one. And then finally, for the IR camera, the idea was kind of novel in my opinion, because the thing is, most of these wildfire sensors need to be really, set up in a proper way, right? They need to be on a high pole, they need to be looking at the area, they need to be in that particular trajectory, that kind of a thing. And I said that, like, that's not going to help, like, if it has to be airdroppable. So what we did was we went to Kaggle, we downloaded like a 50,000 or 20,000 data set of wildfires, right? And then we converted that into a synthetic data set of much larger value by just rotating the images in different ways, right? Daytime, nighttime, IR, no IR, different angles, all of that. And then we trained a MobileNet V2 CNN, which is like a convolutional network, on that to basically classify whether it is a fire or not fire, right? Based on all of these different combinations. So now the original program that we have on the Raspberry Pi Zero goes in three cascades, right? First, it's going to check for temperature. If the temperature threshold is broken, it goes to the particulate matter. If the particulate matter is broken, then it goes to the camera. The reasoning for that is power consumption, right? Because the temperature sensor is like the cheapest one in terms of power. Ideally, what we want is if this device can be just thrown into the wild, it should be able to live for at least one fire season, which is roughly 3 months. So if you strap a 20,000 milliamp hour battery to it, right? How long can it stay? So that's the reasoning. So once you have that, you basically, once you cross the temperature threshold, only then it unlocks the particulate matter threshold. If that also crosses it off, then it goes to the camera, and then the camera basically takes a picture, classifies it, and if all of those are there, then it kind of sends a signal through the LoRa. So the LoRa signal is roughly around like 10 to 20 kb or so, and the idea is that it will be sent, it will be basically sent to the next node, the closest node, which is also listening on the same LoRa frequency. So it kind of goes there, and it doesn't need a telephone network, it doesn't need like any kind of Wi-Fi, things like that, right? All you need is like a gateway near a telephone, I guess, a pole or something like that, to convert the LoRa into actual telephone signals, which can be transmitted back. So we didn't kind of work more on the gateway part. We kind of did like the proof of concept with just the LoRa antennas and a couple of Raspberry Pis. So that's the basic idea. On top of that, we did like some extra stuff, like we added like another like vision language model on top of the server to kind of validate if whatever we were seeing is actually a fire or not. So that's sort of like a teacher model kind of a thing, where it's like really large and kind of validated, because you don't want false positives. Because if these are being airdropped from a helicopter, right, hundreds and hundreds of these in like really far-reaching areas where you can't go, there's possibility that there might be some amount of false positives. So for that, like, you kind of get that kind of vision language model to validate once, and even if that hits, then it kind of raises an alert with the basic point of where this particular thing was, and then you can go there. Yeah, that's it. Like, we built like a simple front end and stuff to showcase it, but that's like not really to the core idea.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, super interesting and super relevant to a lot of folks who have gone through the wildfire, either directly or being impacted by the smoke that many of us in the US have seen. Yeah. How do you prepare for the hackathons? First, how do you know about them? Like, if people want to go to hackathons, how do they get to know about them? Second, what kind of prep do you do? Are you a competitive coder? At this point, I'm going to date myself, top coder or lead code nowadays. Like, do you do all those things? Like, how do you prepare?
Yeah, so I'll kind of start with the first part. Like, folks can find these events on a lot of online platforms. There's like one called Partiful, Partiful. Then there is one called Luma. So both of those are like great resources to kind of find these events, right? That's how I found this one. And then, yeah, in terms of mindset, right? Like, I mean, yes, I do enjoy coding like as a sport. So, I do a lot of lead coding and stuff like that. And then apart from that, it's, I don't know, I like the concept of kind of going there being a timer, no other rules, and just kind of crunch one product out, right? Like, end to end. Try to make it as comprehensive as possible. There's no like meetings, there's no baggage, there's no like red tape around it, right? You just like your vision, and that's it. Like, just go, right? That's the general idea. So that is the allure of it, right? In terms of mindset, I try not to think too much about, like, if it will work, if it will not work. It's mainly about having fun, like going there and just giving it your all and having fun in that environment. So basically, I don't think, like, I carry like my own water bottle and snacks and stuff, because it's like, it's like you're really set at that point, right? Like, you know what you need. So you just go there and you're in the zone and you don't kind of break away from it, right? Some people go to these events for networking and things like that too, so that's also fine, I guess. You don't need to focus so much on that. Yeah, in general, I don't prepare much before that. I just have like vague ideas in my mind which have been bouncing around for a while, and I try to see if an opportunity is more well matched to that particular thing, right? So like, right now I have a few robotics things which I've been kind of pondering on. So I kind of look out, oh, if there's an event for robotics, then maybe that's a relevant place for that, right? Maybe not so much for, say, if it is like a voice AI event, right? Probably not so much there. So if I have a relevant idea and the event is kind of about more or less the theme, then that's a good place to kind of start, maybe, because because whatever you'll be building will actually be relevant in that sense. Yeah. Apart from that, like, no expectations, go there to have fun, be in the zone, and yeah, just like,
That's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. You know what? I think that's something which is so good about a hackathon. You need to worry about, like, hey, what's the business plan? You don't worry about any of these. You just go there and just build for the sake of building, and then you can, like, you to prioritize much ruthlessly, because you have like few hours and you decide, you make a result, work in a prototype. So that's something which is good about hackathons too.
Actually, one thing I'd like to add there is that most of the time I've experienced that the judges really value the fact if there is a business angle to it, right? A business plan to it, or if you have put thought into that. Because I've seen very silly projects as well, right? Like, which are just like for the fun of it. And like, even I've made those, honestly. But, those are like, more tongue in cheek. But like, if you're really there to compete, right, then you need to kind of have that idea as well. You need to have like the business plan idea, how it would be, what would be the problems, things like that, kind of down as well at some level. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, like, let's think about this, your product. Okay. What does the business look like for that? So do you know how much it would cost? Like, and how much? So I'm going to make a Google search about what's like a yearly loss in
Yeah.
California due to wildfires. Okay. And then we could like do a price comparison of how much we would actually save.
Yeah.
So give me 1 second.
Yeah.
So it's almost like $250 billion. So that's our, I think, let's see how much your solution would cost for like wildfire scenario in California.
Right. So the actual device costs around, I think, $100 to $200. That is like off the shelf materials. But I think, you can certainly bring it down if it is kind of mass manufactured. The main pricing or the main cost factor there is, I guess, the camera, because it's an IR camera and that's the main thing. So I think we published like a bill of materials. I have a document about this. I can share it with you guys if you want, where we kind of, wrote like a one pager on, how much does it cost and what are the different components, the higher end, the lower end, things like that. The general thing is to not make it cost prohibitive by kind of using really cheap sensors, or cheap, like, if you don't even need a Raspberry Pi, to be honest. Like, we use that because that is what was available. If you have like your own fab, like a small one, if you have set up for like a temperature sensor, which is very cheap, the particulate matter sensor, which is also cheap, the only expensive parts, the LoRa antenna is like, maybe I think like $60-$70. The camera is the real one. The camera is like $110 or $120. So because it's an IR camera, so it takes images at night as well. So that's the main camera thing, the main pricing issue. So that together, I would say top of the line $200, bottom of the line maybe like 120 or so.
And how many do we need?
So one, I guess, the camera which we used, I think the estimate there was it could, if it lands, basically the idea was that we would put it on like, parachutes, right? So the parachutes can be just airdropped, and then they kind of hang on the tree branches and things like that, right? So then, and since the vision model is trained on like all angles, so it can take pictures from whatever angle it's hanging at. So in that sense, if it has a clear view of the tree line, or if it has a clear view of the horizon, it can take decent photos which can be classified up to around 10 to 12, 10 to 20 kilometers. So you need potentially, in the best case, you need to cover a square area, you would have like, 40 square kilometers, you'd need only 4. And because they can communicate within like 10 km radius anyway, right? So that's the general top line. But when we spoke about this at like with the Shield Capital fellows and these guys, they were like, we don't even care if it is like below $1,000, like, you will just buy in bulk and just throw them everywhere. It doesn't matter that much.
Yeah, this is why I first searched for it, because the loss is so huge that it could even cost like $1,000 and it would still be very cheap compared to what the loss is. So yeah, and like let's say at the worst case scenario, you throw out like 500, like 6,000. Let's just put out like a random number. That's like less than like 4 million something. So it's like a pretty good deal in general. So
6,000 is like 2 million. Yeah, so definitely under the cost. Yeah,
way under, like not just under, way under, right? Like and also like just like one last question. Every 2 years or every 1 year you need to replace them. What's that cycle looks like?
Yeah, so it's actually that's the part which is, I guess, the downside to this problem, right? Like the battery that we have, right? We considered putting in like a solar panel or something, but then the issue becomes that it may not always land on the solar panel side up. So that's the issue. But with like ideally, if you place it by hand instead of a just airdrop, then you put a regenerative solar panel, the price goes up by like around $70, but then its lifespan extends by at least like another 2 months or so. So based on that, we were like, okay, maybe not, it's just 2 months, it's not even like 100% of the original 20,000 milliamp hour battery. So so that's the general idea, but yeah, you'll have to change it every 3 months at least. That's a problem. So we didn't really think too much about the environmental consequences as well, is something that I'd like to call out, because if these will be like kind of dumped in mass every 3 months or so, they're going to cause a lot of e-waste in nature for no reason. So that's like one downside to that as well. So maybe I guess the suggestion would be to only put them in like super high risk or unreachable areas or something like that. But yeah, that's pretty much
I think absolutely. I think that would be a good fit for like a place where you cannot just go there and at a high chance of wildfire. You got a like specific area, and then you can go and do it every 3-4 months. You can update them. Throwing them in the air from the air is like much easier than actually going there in person. So yeah, that sounds great. You also want to talk about like other use cases, right? So
so the other use cases, like the thing was, when we kind of showcased this at the event, wildfire was like the least discussed topic of this, right? Everybody was interested in other use cases. So we were approached by a vet who did like some 2 or 3 tours in Afghanistan, and he's currently at Stanford, and he's also working in tech and AI in general. And his thing was that it could be, this is from his experience, right? Like he would say that he would be in these like mountainous hilly regions where he would have only 3 officers with him, right? And he's like the commander, and he needs 1 officer to keep an eye for tanks coming in from this side, 1 officer to do some other recon work, and 1 officer at like the base that they have. You would say that the resources would be spread thin immediately, and there's like no cell coverage, no nothing like that. It's like within that area or whatever, and it's very difficult for him to he has to put a person there sitting with binoculars looking at like a road constantly. So he said that instead of that, I thought this was really great. Could you kind of swap out, say, the temperature and IR camera and all of that for, say, a sensor which could look for vibrations, and could you kind of embed it under rocks or something and see if you can classify the ground shaking movement of tanks versus just cars or people walking. And if you could do that, then that would be great, because usually what most of the defense guys do is they monitor for this kind of activity of tanks, activity of heavy vehicles with like arms and stuff like that. So if you could classify that, that would kind of free up that resource who's just sitting there every day, just looking at the road, and then that could be put to better use. So that was like one of the use cases which they said. Another use case which fellow from the Navy was asking about is, do LoRa antennas work underwater? Because he was like kind of interested in, I didn't know about this. These are like underwater drones. So that's basically like a small torpedo kind of a thing which doesn't blast, but it has like a fan behind it or a propeller behind it, and it kind of propels forward. And they also make a very weird noise. Some of the more relevant to India, I guess, use cases that we were discussing were, drone monitoring systems, right? Long-range drone monitoring systems. So how would you do that? Like especially in hard-to-reach parts of J&K and things like that, right? If you have like drone incursions, how would you identify those? So you could very easily classify, like with a microphone, you could classify drone noises versus non-drone noises, and have that kind of be daisy chained through the LoRa network towards you to identify what's going on. So these were like a couple of other like defense only use cases. We went with like the simple wildfire use case, but yeah, I guess like people saw a lot more different angles to it.
Absolutely. So Atul, you want to go with some questions? I can keep asking. I have like a lot of questions. I want to make sure that
No, go for it. Go for it. I don't have any pertinent right now, but go for it.
Yeah, this is interesting. I'm just thinking about this. What do they do today for this? Because this is a pretty heavy use case, right? Like India needs this, J&K for sure. US needs this. What do they do today for this kind of purpose?
So currently, I think there are a few pilot programs by a few defense tech firms which utilize similar technology. It's not like designed to be cheap, but these are like larger sets. I think Anduril has one which has LoRa tech to communicate off the grid for detecting movements and things like that. There are a few others. I think Vanavar Techno Labs or these guys also have some. But yeah, basically, all of these are in pilot currently. Defense tech is like, from my conversations with VCs and other people who are working in this, because I actually kind of, since there was like a lot of good reception to this idea, I wanted to see if I'm not missing anything, if it is something worth pursuing, things like that, right? And many of them said that it's usually, there's like this thing called the valley of death, where especially in defense firms, where I guess the only customer is the government, right? And the government will basically give you like a grant in the beginning, and then it has to go through some legislative process to finally be approved, and then that process can be like who knows how long, and that is basically the value of death. So whatever grant that you have has to last you up till an inordinate amount of time that you don't know how long it will take. And that's where most of these defense tech firms or startups basically perish, because there's nothing there. So the solution to that usually is to have a dual use technology, which can be sold to customers as well, so that you can actually make profits and sustain yourself through that. So that's basically the wildfire angle to this as well, right? But yeah, so given that, I think the only firms which have been able to sustain and take this technology from piloting phase to actual use would be like one of the big firms who are currently in talks with the government.
Yeah, that sounds good. It's a fair point. Okay, you got to have some revenue in, and then you could have that wait time until you get approved by the government. Pretty hard. It's hard to get approved by the government. So, but yeah, it's a very, very interesting tech. Okay, it has a lot of use cases. So wildfire, defense, both are pretty heavy cost industries, and yeah, this would be a good tech for them. Now, Atul, you got anything before we conclude on the call?
No, I wanted to explore one this thing. Have you explored like specifically for the wildfire thing?
Yeah.
I was worried about the environmental impact of it, because you keep dropping these silicon things and then no one's collecting them.
Yeah.
But one thing that comes to mind is if there was a rotating swarm of drones, right? The way you mount this, and then you have these drones that keep doing the tour of duty, if you will, and you have these small lily pads on top of trees where they go sit. Once the battery is about to die, they take off and they go.
Oh, that's actually a very good idea. Yeah, I didn't think of that. I know of this concept for, I guess, people use it to monitor the ranch and stuff, where it's like a really large property.
Yeah.
But this actually makes more sense in terms of environmental impact. Also, having a drone gives you mobility, right? So then you can actually just roam around and cover a lot more, and you need a lot lesser.
Yeah. So I mean, from a capex perspective, your expense goes down. From an operating opex perspective, now you're only replacing things that have gone bad, and not something that it's not a consumable product. It's a reusable product. So from a product perspective, it makes more sense for the longevity of the company, because otherwise you're just pumping capital into the company to make it work.
Yeah. No, definitely makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, right? If you have a drone attached system that can have some bit of AI train itself, goes across from one location to the other, comes back and forth, way often. Then and then you have you're already trained the images, you've done all the other work. So then the hardware is the only thing that you need, to be more like a drone thing.
Yeah,
that's also a pretty interesting idea. So.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to call out that when you add a drone, you are adding cost.
Yeah.
But at the same, and also like, is it autonomous swarm? Is it a FPV drone? All of those things. So I don't want to trivialize the complexity there, but it will make the operations easier. Yeah, it is a higher input problem. But just wanted to throw it out there.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's definitely interesting perspective towards this problem. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think, this is what happens when we build things, right? We start with a great idea, and then slowly we'll realize, oh, this is a constraint, oh, that's a constraint, we got to fix this. And I guess at the end of it, we reach somewhere, okay? And that itself is very, useful. So that's how all products work, right? So
I have like one more interesting thing that I'd like to chat, because it sort of feels like a very informal chat here, right? Like, this is not related to the NatSec hackathon itself, but it's related to another one, but also something that I've been working on at my workplace as well, which is very interesting to me, and I think it'd be interesting for you guys as well at some level, and then maybe it'd be cool to have your inputs as well. So, have you guys heard of knowledge graphs?
Yes.
Yeah, so I've been like super deep into knowledge graphs recently, and I find it very compelling that it kind of gives you the power of fine tuning without actually having to fine tune. So it's more in like the data infrastructure area, which I'm more comfortable with, like, naturally, right? And so I'll give you an example of one of the things that I've done at work, right? So we have the Slack channel where we post about production incidents, right? If there's a production incident, there's like a workflow which frontline engineer posts that this particular cell has this particular issue, like high CPU, whatever, and then like the comments or the replies have information about, like, other subject matter experts talking about the problem. Like, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Oh, this is interesting. I saw this similar thing this time, or whatever, right? And that is like a lot of valuable information, which is known as like tribal knowledge or something like that, right? Where only a few people know. And it's not necessary that the same frontline engineer and the same subject matter expert are going to look at the same problem all the time, right? It's going to be different engineers, different subject matter experts looking at the same thing, or like different problems in different points in time. And all of that knowledge is captured in these Slack threads in an unstructured format. Currently, Slack has like a RAG setup or something in the search, but that's not as good, because like if you ask it, it's going to basically boil the ocean for the same thing, right? So that's it'll give you like the same answer. It'll give you yes and no, like if you ask it again. So that's like not as helpful. So my general thing that I did there, or which was interesting to me, and which has actually shown a lot of value to us, right, is converting this unstructured Slack threads into knowledge graphs, right? And then using an MCP server on top of these knowledge graphs, and then an agent to interact with the MCP server with a fixed set of questions. So the idea is that you have this production incidents channel. You convert that into like a schema, right? You have an incident, you have basically a problem, a solution, a potential solution, a root cause, some extra links, things like that. So what happens is it creates this link of a web of these different problems and solutions. And if you generalize it a little bit, if you canonicalize the problem sets or the solution names and things like that, what happens is you start to see this larger pattern of where other deployments may have seen a similar issue, where other solutions may apply to this particular problem. And this kind of shared brain of all of these different subject matter experts working on disparate systems, disparate problems, kind of comes together in a coherent, unified way. And that showed like insane value to us, right? Like earlier when there used to be an incident, people would be like, oh, this incident we're okay with, we have a run book for this, that's good, like we know what to do, like boom boom boom, and you're good. But randomly you see this incident, you're like, oh my god, what to do now, right? Where's that guy who worked on it last time? Or like, does anybody know what to do? Or like, maybe we should just roll back and forget about it, right? Like but now, like, with this you have like perfect historical recall of not only that particular deployment but any other deployment which showed any similar metrics or symptoms of this particular problem, and then the solutions which were taken at that point in time and how they would be applicable to this particular problem. And that has been like really awesome. And like we uncovered like so many interesting problems with that. Like we were able to now predict problems in the future. Like for one customer, right, they have like some summer sales or something, and we saw that they had like an issue last year, and this year also around like similar time we saw one of those issues. And that got me thinking. I was like, oh, why is this issue over here, right? Like we saw exactly same day last year. So then we kind of ran the whole thing, and we saw that just after that, after like 3 weeks, we started to see more like high CPU issues, things like that, because the sales cycle was like that, right? Like the initial first day, and then like whatever prime day or whatever you want to call it, like whatever that customer had, like that sale that came in later. So you saw that pattern, which nobody would have actually spent time thinking about, right? But now when we ran it now when you Google it, you see that, okay, this issue happened here. Now the next one is going to be in like 3 weeks. So now you can prepare for it. And then it kind of becomes like that. And this kind of gets automated. So it's not like, one customer, right? Everybody can do it. So you don't need to have somebody look at every customer all the time and things like that. So I think that has been super interesting to me personally, the use of knowledge graphs in this way. I implemented like a I guess, production incidents kind of variation of this in another hackathon, which also one was basically understanding interactions of drugs, which is very similar. So like the FDA has this adverse effects database, which is open source. So it took that data, unwrangled it, and put it into a knowledge graph, put an MCP server on top, put an agent on top of the MCP server, gave it a bunch of set instructions, and then you can put a voice AI on top of it, and then you can basically chat with it. You can say that, oh, I'm like a 60-year-old person who takes warfarin, and I got a boo-boo here. So should I take ibuprofen, right? And then it basically goes through the knowledge graph and looks at drug interactions of warfarin and ibuprofen and your personal profile, and kind of can understand that, oh, you're more prone to blood clotting or bleeding or something like that, and that's why you should or should not take it, or you should consult a doctor and things like that. And these are things which you would probably call a nurse line or something, right? Because it's not really medical advice as such, but it's basically advice on the medication, right? Like, is this medication good or bad, or is there interaction, things like that. This is the stuff which people have to do themselves online, or they have to call a nurse and tell them about their condition, and then the medication, and then the nurse puts two and two together and says that, oh, you might bleed out or something like that. So this kind of self-serve automated service was something that I created for the last one. But yeah, that's basically something that I went to.
Yeah, knowledge graphs is a favorite of mine for a long time. Before knowledge graphs were knowledge graphs, this was basically ontologies. A lot of ontologies were also used in the past, WordNet and stuff. So it provides you a nice way. Knowledge graph provides you a way to represent entities. WordNet and other ontologies were nice to represent language as such. And the whole hypothesis was language would be the a representation of the real world, but then a lot of things happen. But yeah, knowledge graphs. Have you looked into the relational foundational models that Kumo and others are looking at?
No, I have not. That's interesting. Oh, Kumo, you said?
Kumo.ai, Yuri Leskovic from Stanford, it's his company. He's a professor. He dives deep into knowledge graphs, and not knowledge graphs per se, but relational foundational models. So very interesting this thing. But there are also other graph-based LLM efforts, and GraphRag is very well known, and GraphRag kind of took off for a while. But yeah, this is super interesting, man. Yeah.
Yeah, so like if you want to see that particular entry, I've posted that in the Google chat here. That's basically the entry from the last one where I participated for this. I wanted to see like more. So I'm just taking notes here. So Kumo, Kumo, AI. Okay.
Yeah, I
Foundation
think I've
model.
heard about that. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, quite interesting. There's quite a few things going on. I do need to read more about this foundational models. And I'm gonna. I think I've been too busy building a business. I was just making the pure ARR, I would say. But at the end of the day,